The snow fell silently across the Finnish wilderness in late November of 1939, blanketing everything in an eerie white stillness. The temperature had already plunged to 20 degrees below zero, and it would get much worse. Somewhere in that frozen landscape, hidden among the snowdrifts and pine trees, a small figure lay completely motionless. His name was Simo Häyhä, a 34-year-old farmer who had lived his entire life working the land near the Russian border. He wore white camouflage from head to toe, making him virtually invisible against the snow. In his gloved hands, he held a Finnish-made rifle, a modified version of the Russian Mosin Nagant. Through the iron sights of that rifle, he watched a column of Soviet soldiers advancing through the forest, their dark uniforms standing out starkly against the pristine white background. They had no idea they were being watched. They had no idea that death was waiting for them, patient and silent. Simo Häyhä had not expected to be here. Just weeks earlier, he had been tending to his farm in the small town of Ruthless, living the quiet life he had always known. Born in December of 1905 into a large farming family, Simo was the seventh of 8 children. His childhood was filled with hard work on the family farm and long days spent in the Finnish wilderness. His father, Juho, ran the farm with a firm hand, while his mother Katrina provided the warmth and care that kept the family together. The land near the Russian border was harsh and unforgiving, and it shaped young Simo into a resilient and patient man. He learned to hunt at an early age, spending countless hours in the forests tracking game. Those long, quiet hours taught him how to move without sound, how to read the landscape, how to wait for the perfect moment. He became an excellent marksman, not through any formal training, but simply through practice and natural talent. When other children saw Simo riding his bicycle with his rifle, they would follow him, eager to watch him hit target after target with impossible precision. In 1925, at age 19, Simo fulfilled his mandatory military service in the Finnish army. He served for 15 months in the bicycle battalion, and though the time was relatively short, he made the most of it. He attended non-commissioned officer school, and by the time he was honorably discharged, he had earned the rank of corporal. But formal military service was just the beginning of his training. After leaving the army, Simo joined the Finnish Civil Guard, an organization similar to the National Guard. It was here that his shooting skills truly flourished. He received extensive target practice and discovered that shooting was not just a necessary skill, but something he genuinely enjoyed. He spent every spare moment outdoors, shooting at whatever targets he could find. His dedication was extraordinary. He trained himself to hit a target 16 times per minute at a distance of about 500 feet, a feat that required not just accuracy, but incredible speed and consistency. His rifle of choice was the Russian-built Mosin Nagant bolt-action, and later the better-performing Finnish version known as the M2830. He also became proficient with the Suomi submachine gun. What set Simo apart was not just his accuracy, but his philosophy of shooting. While many snipers of the era were beginning to use telescopic sights, Simo preferred iron sights. His reasoning was simple but profound. Telescopic sights had several disadvantages that could prove fatal in combat. They required the shooter to raise his head slightly higher to look through the scope, presenting a larger target to enemy snipers. The glass lenses could fog up in freezing temperatures, rendering them useless. Worst of all, the lenses could catch the sun and create a telltale glint that would instantly reveal a sniper's position. Simo wanted none of these risks. He kept his profile as low as possible, his rifle buried in the snow, relying on the simple iron sights he had practiced with for years. The Soviet Union had been eyeing Finnish territory for some time. In late 1939, as Europe descended into the chaos of World War II, Soviet leader Joseph Stalin made his move. He demanded that Finland cede territory near Leningrad and allow Soviet military bases on Finnish soil. When Finland refused, Stalin ordered the invasion. On November 30th, 1939, the Winter War began. The Soviet Union attacked with overwhelming force. They had 1.5 million soldiers, thousands of tanks, and hundreds of aircraft. Finland had an army of just 300,000 men, limited equipment, and virtually no international support. Every military analyst in the world predicted a swift Soviet victory. They thought Finland would fall in a matter of weeks, perhaps days. They were wrong. The Finns had several advantages that the Soviets had not counted on. First, they knew their own terrain intimately. The Finnish landscape was a maze of forests, lakes, and rough ground that made large-scale military operations extremely difficult. There were few major roads and only one rail line, forcing armies to funnel through predictable routes. Second, the Finns were experts in winter warfare. They had grown up in this climate and knew how to survive and fight in extreme cold. Third, and perhaps most importantly, they were fighting for their homes, their families, and their freedom. They had everything to lose. The Soviets, by contrast, were unprepared for the brutal Finnish winter. They had been told to expect a swift victory and a triumphal parade in Helsinki. They were issued inadequate winter gear, no white camouflage, and no skis. When temperatures dropped to 40 degrees below zero, Soviet soldiers suffered terribly. Their dark uniforms made them easy targets against the snow. Their tanks and vehicles broke down in the cold. Their morale began to crack. It was into this maelstrom that Simo Häyhä was called to service. As a member of the Civil Guard, he was mobilized immediately when war broke out. He was assigned to the 6th Company of Infantry Regiment 34, under the command of Lieutenant Arne Juutilainen, one of Finland's most capable officers. His unit was sent to the Kola River, a critical defensive position where the Soviets were attempting to break through Finnish lines and outflank the main defensive positions in the south. The Battle of Kola would become one of the most legendary defensive stands of the entire war. The Finnish forces were vastly outnumbered, but they held their ground with incredible determination. And it was here, in the frozen forests along the Kola River, that Simo Häyhä would become a legend. Simo's routine became almost ritualistic. He would wake before dawn, dress in multiple layers of white camouflage, and pack his pockets with simple provisions: sugar cubes for quick energy, rye bread to stave off hunger. He carried only 1 day's worth of ammunition, just enough to avoid being weighed down. He would then venture out into the snow alone, selecting his position with meticulous care. He looked for locations that provided good lines of sight while offering maximum concealment. Once he found his spot, he would begin his preparations. First, he would pack snow in front of his position to create a small barrier. This served multiple purposes. It provided additional concealment, padding for his rifle to reduce recoil, and critically, it prevented the blast from his rifle from kicking up a cloud of snow that would reveal his location. He would compress the snow until it was solid, creating what was essentially a shooting platform that absorbed the signature of his shots. Then came his most unusual tactic. Simo would take snow into his mouth and hold it there while waiting for his targets. This prevented his breath from creating visible vapor in the freezing air. In temperatures that could reach 40 degrees below zero, even the slightest breath would create a telltale mist that could give away his position. By keeping snow in his mouth, he eliminated this risk entirely. It was uncomfortable, even painful, but it kept him invisible. He would lie in his position for hours, sometimes an entire day, waiting patiently for Soviet soldiers to enter his field of fire. He never rushed a shot. He never took unnecessary risks. Each pull of the trigger was calculated, precise, deliberate. When a target appeared, he would control his breathing, steady his aim, and fire. The rifle would crack once, and somewhere in the distance, a Soviet soldier would fall. Then Simo would wait again, motionless, watching for the next target. The Soviet forces quickly realized they had a serious problem. Soldiers were being killed by an unseen enemy. They would be walking through what they thought was a secure area, and suddenly one of them would drop dead from a single shot. Then another. Then another. There was no warning, no sound before the shot, no indication of where the fire was coming from. Fear began to spread through the Soviet ranks. They started to believe they were fighting against something supernatural, a ghost in the snow. Reports filtered back through the Soviet command structure about a Finnish sniper of extraordinary skill. They began to call him Belaya Smrt, the White Death. The name was apt. Simo Häyhä had become death itself, invisible and inevitable. As word spread about the White Death, the Finnish press seized on the story. In a war where Finland was desperately outmatched, Simo Häyhä became a symbol of hope and resistance. Articles about him appeared in newspapers, each one adding to his growing legend. He was not just a sniper, he became the embodiment of the Finnish spirit. Proof that determination and skill could triumph over overwhelming odds. His fellow soldiers began to call him the magic shooter, but Simo himself remained humble and quiet. He did not boast about his kills. He did not seek glory. He simply did his job day after day with the same patient precision he had brought to farming and hunting. In his own mind, he was just a soldier following orders, doing what needed to be done to protect his homeland. The statistics of Simo's shooting were almost beyond belief. Over the course of roughly 100 days, he killed more than 500 Soviet soldiers. That's an average of 5 kills per day, sustained over more than 3 months, in some of the harshest combat conditions imaginable. And these numbers only counted kills that were verified by other Finnish soldiers. If there was any doubt about whether Simo had made the kill, it wasn't counted. If multiple snipers were firing at the same target, it wasn't counted. These were confirmed, individual kills, each one witnessed and recorded. When Simo used his submachine gun while leading a group, those kills weren't counted either. The 500 confirmed kills were from his sniper rifle alone. Some historians believe his actual total may have been even higher, perhaps as many as 542, but Simo himself estimated it at around 500 in his private war memoirs. To put this in perspective, most snipers in World War II would consider themselves successful with 20 or 30 confirmed kills. 50 kills would make someone exceptional. 100 would make someone legendary. Simo Häyhä had 5 times that number, achieved in a fraction of the time that most snipers spent in combat. He had become, and remains to this day, the deadliest sniper in recorded military history. His success was no accident. It was the result of a perfect combination of factors. Natural talent honed over years of hunting, rigorous training in the civil guard, intimate knowledge of the terrain, the right equipment, and perhaps most importantly, the right temperament. Simo had a personality ideally suited for sniping. He could be alone for hours without discomfort. He could remain patient when others would have grown restless. He could kill without letting emotion cloud his judgment. As he later said in an interview, war was not pleasant, but someone had to defend the land. The Soviets, meanwhile, grew increasingly desperate to eliminate the White Death. They sent their own counter-snipers to hunt him down. They directed artillery barrages at areas where they thought he might be hiding. They even attempted coordinated infantry sweeps to flush him out. Nothing worked. Simo was always one step ahead. He never used the same position twice in a row. He never fell into predictable patterns. He understood that staying alive was just as important as getting kills, and his meticulous preparation and discipline kept him safe, even as the Soviets threw everything they had at him. On one occasion, the Soviets launched a massive artillery bombardment on an area where they believed Simo was operating. Shells rained down, tearing up the forest and creating chaos. When the smoke cleared, Simo emerged with nothing more than a scratch on his back and a ruined coat. He had survived, and he continued his deadly work. But in war, luck eventually runs out for everyone, no matter how skilled they are. On March 6, 1940, just 11 days before the war would end, Simo Häyhä's extraordinary run came to a brutal halt. He was in his usual position, hidden in the snow, when a Soviet soldier spotted him. Whether it was luck, skill, or simply the law of averages catching up, we'll never know. But that Soviet soldier fired, and his shot found its mark. The round and explosive bullet struck Simo directly in the jaw. The impact was devastating. It shattered his jaw and tore away much of the left side of his face. He was immediately knocked unconscious and fell into a coma. His fellow soldiers found him and rushed him to a field hospital, but no one expected him to survive. The injury was too severe, the damage too extensive. The doctors did what they could, but they held out little hope. For 11 days, Simo Häyhä lay unconscious, hovering between life and death. Back in the field, the war continued to rage. The Soviets launched their final major offensive, throwing massive numbers of troops and artillery into a desperate attempt to break through Finnish lines. The Finns, exhausted and low on ammunition, fought back with everything they had. And then, on March 13, 1940, the impossible happened. The Soviet Union, despite all its advantages in men and material, agreed to a peace treaty. Finland had held out. The terms were harsh. Finland had to cede significant territory, including the city of Viipuri, and about 11% of its total land. But Finland survived as an independent nation. The Finns had lost approximately 25,000 soldiers. The Soviets had lost over 150,000, possibly more. It was a Pyrrhic victory for Stalin, who had wanted a quick conquest and instead got a bloody, humiliating stalemate. On the very day the peace treaty was signed, Simo Häyhä opened his eyes. He woke from his coma to find that the war was over and Finland was still free. His face was horribly disfigured, the left side permanently scarred and misshapen from the bullet wound. He would need years of reconstructive surgery and would never look the same again. But he was alive, against all odds. The Finnish military recognized his extraordinary service with a promotion that was unprecedented in the nation's history. Simo was jumped from the rank of corporal directly to second lieutenant, skipping every rank in between. No one in Finnish military history had ever received such a promotion. He was also awarded numerous medals, including the Cross of Collar, one of only 7 made in silver, and was nominated for the Mannerheim Cross, Finland's highest military honor. Though he did not receive the Mannerheim Cross due to administrative technicalities, the recognition of his service was universal. After the war, Simo Häyhä faced a long and difficult recovery. The injury to his jaw was severe, and it took years of surgeries to rebuild his face. He would always bear the scars, a permanent reminder of that final battle. But Simo approached his recovery the same way he had approached everything else in his life, with patience, determination, and no complaints. When he was finally well enough, he returned to the life he had always known. The Finnish government gave him a small farm in gratitude for his service, and he settled down to work the land once more. He became a successful farmer, moose hunter, and dog breeder. He found peace in the quiet rhythms of rural life, far from the frozen battlefields where he had made his name. But fame, once earned, is hard to escape. Simo became a national hero in Finland, a living symbol of the Winter War and Finnish resistance. He was invited on numerous hunting trips with Finnish President Urho Kekkonen, and people would travel from far away just to meet the legendary White Death. Yet Simo himself remained remarkably humble about his wartime achievements. He rarely spoke about his experiences unless directly asked. He never boasted about his kill count or tried to profit from his fame. When people asked him how he had become such an effective sniper, he would simply say it was practice, nothing more. He deflected praise and lived quietly, content with his simple life. Not everyone celebrated Simo's actions, however. In the years after the war, he received hate mail and even death threats. Some came from people who objected to killing on moral grounds. Others may have come from Soviet sympathizers or families of the soldiers he had killed. Simo accepted this as part of the cost of war. He never expressed regret for what he had done, but neither did he take pride in it. When asked in an interview in 2001, shortly before his 96th birthday, if he felt remorse for killing so many people, his answer was simple and direct. "I did what I was told, as well as I could. There would be no Finland unless everyone had done the same." For Simo, it had never been about glory or personal achievement. It had been about survival, about defending his home and his people. The secret of the White Death, then, was not really a secret at all. It was discipline, it was patience, it was meticulous preparation and attention to every tiny detail. It was the willingness to endure extreme discomfort and danger without complaint. It was the ability to stay calm under pressure and to execute each shot with the same precision as the last. Simo Häyhä did not have superior technology or supernatural abilities. He had iron sights on a rifle that was already obsolete by the standards of the day. What he had was skill developed over a lifetime, an intimate understanding of his environment, and the temperament to use those advantages effectively. He understood that in war, the smallest details can mean the difference between life and death. The glint of a telescopic sight, a puff of breath in cold air, a cloud of snow kicked up by rifle blast. He eliminated every possible way an enemy could detect him, and he did it through careful thought and preparation. Modern military snipers still study Simo Häyhä's tactics today. His story is taught in military academies around the world as an example of excellence in marksmanship and battlefield strategy. His preference for iron sights, his use of natural concealment, his patience and discipline, all of these lessons remain relevant. In an age of high-tech warfare with thermal imaging and satellite surveillance, there is still something to learn from a farmer who lay in the snow with an old rifle and iron sights, waiting for the perfect shot. Simo Häyhä lived for 62 years after the end of the Winter War. He spent those years in peace, working his farm, hunting moose, breeding dogs, and occasionally meeting with other veterans to remember the fallen. He passed away on April 1st, 2002, at the age of 96 in a veterans' nursing home. He was buried in his hometown of Ruokolahti, the place where he had rebuilt his life after the war. Today, there is a museum dedicated to Simo Häyhä and the Battle of Kolar, located in the village of Miettila in Rautjärvi. It preserves the memory of the Winter War and the incredible determination of the Finnish soldiers who fought in it. His story has been adapted into books, articles, documentaries, and even inspired characters in films and video games. A Swedish heavy metal band called Sabaton wrote a song titled White Death in his honor, released in 2010. In 2017, 15 years after his death, Simo's private war memoirs were discovered. Written in 1940, just months after he was wounded, the manuscript had been hidden for decades. In it, he recounted his experiences during the Winter War, confirming much of what had become legend. He referred to his kill count as his list of sins, a telling phrase that revealed how he viewed his actions. He did not glorify what he had done. He recognized it for what it was, necessary, effective, but still a burden to carry. The Winter War itself had far-reaching consequences beyond Finland's borders. It demonstrated to the world that the Soviet Red Army, despite its size, was poorly led and poorly prepared. This was partly due to Stalin's purges of military leadership in the late 1930s, which had killed or imprisoned many of the Soviet Union's most competent officers. The performance of Soviet forces in Finland likely influenced Adolf Hitler's decision to invade the Soviet Union in 1941. If the mighty Red Army could struggle so badly against tiny Finland, Hitler reasoned, surely Germany could defeat them. This miscalculation would prove catastrophic for Germany, as the Soviets learned from their mistakes in Finland and fought with incredible determination when their own homeland was invaded. The Winter War and the resistance that soldiers like Simo Häyhä embodied thus played a role in the larger trajectory of World War II. But beyond the grand sweep of history, Simo Häyhä's story resonates on a more personal level. It's a reminder that ordinary people can accomplish extraordinary things when circumstances demand it. Simo was not a career soldier or a professional warrior. He was a farmer, a man who loved the land and the simple pleasures of rural life. When his country needed him, he answered the call and performed his duty with a level of skill and dedication that has never been matched. He did not seek war or glory. He simply did what he believed was necessary to protect his home and his way of life. And when the war was over, he returned to that simple life without fanfare or complaint. In many ways, his humility and quiet dignity are just as impressive as his achievements on the battlefield. The legacy of the White Death endures not because of the number of enemies he killed, though that number is staggering, but because of what his story represents. It represents the power of preparation and discipline. It represents the importance of understanding your environment and using it to your advantage. It represents the value of patience and careful thought over reckless action. And perhaps most importantly, it represents the idea that true heroism is not about seeking glory, but about doing your duty as well as you can, even when the task is difficult and the cost is high. Simo Häyhä never wanted to be a legend. He just wanted to be a good soldier, and in pursuing that simple goal with absolute commitment, he became one of the most remarkable soldiers in the history of warfare. So what can we learn from the White Death? We can learn that success in any difficult endeavor comes from mastering the fundamentals, from paying attention to details that others might overlook, from being willing to endure discomfort and difficulty in pursuit of excellence. We can learn that sometimes the simplest tools, used with supreme skill, are more effective than the most advanced technology used carelessly. We can learn that patience and discipline will often triumph over brute force and numbers. And we can learn that true strength comes not from physical size or overwhelming power, but from the determination to do what must be done, no matter the odds. Simo Häyhä stood 5 feet 3 inches tall and weighed perhaps 150 pounds. But in the frozen forests of Finland, he became a giant, a force that an army of 500,000 men could not stop. That is the real secret of the White Death, and it's a lesson that transcends the battlefield and applies to any challenge we might face in life. Thank you so much for watching this video all the way to the end. If you found this story as incredible as I did, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We're dedicated to bringing you the most compelling stories from World War II, stories of courage, sacrifice, and extraordinary human achievement that deserve to be remembered. But I need your help. We need to reach 100 comments on this video to keep bringing you more inspirational stories like this one. So please take a moment right now and leave a comment below. Tell me what you thought of Simo Häyhä's story. What impressed you most about his tactics and his character? And if you want, tell me from which part of the world you're watching this video. Your comment matters, and I want to read it and reply. For more exciting stories like this one, click on the video appearing on your screen right now.